Satisfied. Super, the point is made there. We have a question down from back.
Just to build on the previous discussion around professional and amateur, coming from Australia, I can tell you one of the key concerns of doping in rugby is at schoolboy level, and it's critical that we're seeing not just in Australia but also in South Africa and I think in the UK, a culture of doping going into schools and mafia type people preying on those schools, particularly the well-to-do schools where they're paying a lot of money. So I think it's important to recognise that it's not just a function of professional and standard amateur, but you've also got to go down to these levels. I mean, we saw not that long ago somebody in a Grand Fondo cycling race tested positive for EPO. Grand Fondo, that's like a community cycling event. It's just quite staggering how far down this can go.
So that's more of a comment. Yeah.
How could they afford that testing?
On the Grand Fondo? Ask her, she's from the
They
south.
paid for it.
Laura
We have
Robinson.
a lot of events that contract to do testing, because I think one of the issues we haven't discussed in this session is the fact that there are a lot of athletes that compete at what people would like to term an amateur level that also want a clean playing field. So if I'm an athlete who may just happen to be 35 and I happen to compete in a master's event, but I'm an excellent swimmer and I want to be competing against other 35-year-olds and I want to stay competitive, I don't want to be competing against somebody who's doping. So there are a lot of athletes at that master's level that have gotten together at events and said, we want to have testing in our event because it matters to us that we will compete on a clean playing field. And they've worked together to try to get testing to come to their events for that specific reason. And that's not to say that there's not a lot of education that goes into helping those athletes understand their rights and responsibilities prior to that happening. But to have this notion that those people just don't care is completely inaccurate from my experience, from what we handle.
It's a very valuable comment, and it shows us how easy it is to become a cheater, because you just jump the line. Sorry, it was delayed in the front here.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that though, because Laura Robinson from Canada, and I did race on the national team in cycling, and my winter sport was cross-country skiing. Those are two well-known doping sports, and I'm sure I raced against many people who were doping. And with the perspective of age, maybe unfortunately, but I actually don't care, if you want to know the truth. And I'll tell you why. It's because when I look at all the other unfair practices in sport, doping is the least of my concerns. I started talking about sexual abuse in sport way back in 1992. It's still a massive problem. When I looked at all the cycling coaches who were helping themselves to teenage girls, I mean, doping was nothing. We're not talking about the real unfairnesses in sport. And so, Lassie, when you said it's ultimately beneficial, I'm not sure of that, because one thing doping, like mandatory doping does, we talk about the tag, it teaches